All right, thanks for checking out Museum Ship Mafia tonight. Deviating a little bit from World War II. Tonight we're talking about the Civil War. And as much as I know about World War II, I know practically nothing about the Civil War. So this one's going to be fascinating. This is another event that we're doing with the Naval Institute Press. And tonight we're talking about what I call the Ironclad Captain. This guy's name is John Worden. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Admiral John Worden. And yeah, so tonight, obviously people helping me. We've got Shane Stevenson from the Buffalo Naval Park. And we've got John Epp from the USS Slater. And Connor Kilgore from the Museum Ships Facebook group. And like I always say, we can't do this without viewers and subscribers. So let us know where you're watching from. Let us know what questions you have. Submit your comments. And, you know, if you're like me and you don't know much about the Civil War, you can even throw that in there too. But when this subject came up from the Naval Institute Press, I was pretty excited about it. And I always like to learn something new. So let's see. Let's dive right in. We've got... All right, here we go. All right, so the name of the book tonight that we're going to be covering is called From Ironclads to Admiral, John Lorimer Worden and Naval Leadership. Now, it's co-authored, two gentlemen, and we have one of them with us here tonight, Robert Worden, and the other author, John, is it Quarstein, Robert?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so John might be a little bit late. He's doing a presentation and might be joining us in a little bit, but we're fortunate enough to have Robert here tonight. Robert Worden, who retired from the Library of Congress in 2007 after 38 years of federal service. Was all 38 years with the Library of Congress?
No, 34 with the Library of Congress, 2 with the United States Army. I'm working backwards, and 2 with the Peace Corps.
Gotcha. So that's Robert on the left, obviously. And let's see. Robert's also authored more than, I found this one interesting, so you're going to have to explain this one as well. Authored more than 100 Asia-related historical and current affairs studies and books for government agencies. Explain yourself.
Okay. Well, that took 34 years to do that. The average probably is so impressive when you look at it that way. The division of the Library of Congress that I worked for that entire time is the Federal Research Division, and that's the part of the Library of Congress that does research for primarily executive branch agencies that needed some additional research to support their programs. And I worked in the Asia area throughout my career, started with China and moved on to other Asian countries. And so, yeah, we wrote studies, directed research studies for government agencies. And that's why there's so many of those. I also did some publishing off on my own from time to time, too.
But does that mean you're an Asian expert?
I like to say I'm an Asian specialist.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, thank you.
Fair enough. Let's see. And obviously, if you check out Robert's last name, he's a descendant of Admiral Worden, who's the subject of the book that we're going to be talking about tonight. Let's see. So the guy that Robert and John wrote about is this guy right here. So should we be referring to him as Admiral Worden or Captain Worden?
Well, it depends on what period of time. Started off as midshipman, and then master, which was a inner rank before lieutenant, and then eventually he was a lieutenant for a long time in the pre-Civil War Navy, and then during the Civil War he became a captain, commander, and then a captain. He didn't make it to admiral till years later.
Let me pull up some facts about this guy because, like I said earlier, I don't know much about the Civil War, and when I get an opportunity to dig into somebody like this, I'm always pleased when I can learn a lot. So when you look at this guy, I mean, in his uniform, obviously pretty confident and everything, but some of the stats behind him, he had a 52-year-long naval career, which I think is amazing. But it seems to me like he started out in the Mexican-American War, and it sounds like he had a lot of courage. He led a rescue mission, captured a prize ship, then he worked at the U.S. Naval Observatory for 3 tours, and then he had something to do with moving the U.S. Navy from a sailing-based fleet to ironclad-technology. Do I have that right?
Yes, you've got that right. But the Mexican-American War didn't come along until 1846. He joined the Navy in 1834, and he learned how to be a Navy officer the traditional way, by sailing on sailing ships, by serving on sailing ships. And he served on at least 4 different ships before the Mexican-American War. So he learned the craft of sailing, basically we call tall ships.
Mm-hmm. Now, did he have a family connection to the Navy, or was this something that he just did on his own?
Well, that was always an interesting question I asked myself as I was doing research on him over the years, and I discovered that on his mother's side, he had a cousin, her cousin, his mother's cousin, John Hodges Graham, who was a hero of the War of 1812. And I like to think of him as a hero because he was in one of those early naval battles on the Great Lakes, and he got a leg shot off. And yet he continued to serve in the Navy for the next 50 years. So that was probably a pretty good example of a naval officer. Well, I dug a little further and found out that on another branch of his family, he had 5 other active duty naval officers that he was related to fairly closely, like first cousins, second cousins, so forth. And they were all in the New York City area. He came from up the river, as they say, from near Austining, New He spent time in New York City, and he very likely met these people. So that was, he didn't do his own volition. I think he had a lot of influence there. And that's the part of the book I worked on.
Well, obviously with a family connection, what does that make you? Are you like a great?
Well, let me say I'm great. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. I walked right into that, didn't I?
That was a good one, John. Robert.
Shane's laughing like crazy. Yeah, okay. I mean, so what is your relation to Admiral John Worden?
For the genealogists out there, I'm a first cousin 3 generations removed. What that means is that Admiral Worden's father and my great-great-grandfather were brothers. So my great-grandfather and Admiral Worden were first cousins. Now I'm several generations later, so I become the first cousin 3 generations removed. I
actually think you should grow your beard, Robert, that long that we see in that picture. You would be fairly identical to him.
Maybe. I don't know if my wife would agree with that. But anyway. I also want to mention that Admiral Worden had a son named John Worden Jr., who died in 1873 with no children. He had a grandson named John Lorimer Worden also. He died without any children. Now, my grandfather took on the name of John Lorimer Worden. He named my father John Lorimer Worden Jr. I have a brother named John Worden Lorimer III. He has a son named John Lorimer Worden IV and a grandson named John Lorimer Worden V, who's a member of the United States Army. So I grew up in a home of John Lorimer Worden, and we knew we were related. And I spent, since I was a child, kind of following and reading whatever I could about the man. So this has been kind of built into it's in my DNA, yes, but built into my intellectual DNA, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. When you were in elementary school, were you one of those like smart-ass kids where you say, it's like, well, hey, I've got a relative that is actually in that book that we're studying?
Well, I would have. Yeah, I know you would have. You look like a guy. No, I think it came up in conversation. A teacher might once in a while ask, are you related to this guy we heard about in the Battle of Hampton Roads? And I
Oh,
said,
no
yeah, I
kidding.
am.
Uh-huh.
I'm a humble guy. I didn't.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah.
Well, then, you know, what is the story that you knew as a kid basically just the story of him being the captain of the Monitor, or did it go back to him, you know, rising through the ranks of the Navy?
That's a great question, because as I approached my research on this many years back, I wanted to know more. Everybody, well, not everybody, many people know about his being commander of the Monitor, the first battle between ironclads. It changed world history in regard to naval warfare. And little he had little biographies and encyclopedias, and people wrote about him once in a while. They knew he had some other Civil War involvements, but they weren't very clear about it. Well, I wanted to, as John Quarstein and I engaged in this book, and he definitely is the war guy. He wrote the chapters dealing with wars. I'm sort of the peace guy. I wrote about the times that the United States was not at war and what he was doing. But neither of us really knew a whole lot. And one of the questions was that we asked at the beginning, after the Battle of Hampton Roads, Worden was kind of introduced to the public. They didn't know much about him beforehand. He was introduced to the public as a scientific officer. And, well, what did that mean exactly? So I dug a little deeper into his career. Felt, well, he was at the Naval Observatory, 3 tours, but we didn't know what he did. So I live in near Washington, D.C. I'm a veteran researcher at the National Archives. So I dug into a lot of materials there, including the records of the Naval Observatory. And I found notebooks that he kept, his own journals and ledgers that he personally kept while he was a midshipman first there, and then later as a lieutenant. So I learned a lot about his activities there and what he was doing. And it's very technical work what he was doing. They were calibrating naval equipment going out to sea, like chronometers and telescopes and other naval paraphernalia, instruments, if you will. And he also worked in the observatory, looking at the galaxies and looking at certain stars and star formations, which are critical to navigation. So he was pretty keen on those kind of things. But I also went through the log of every ship he ever served on. And that began in 1834 all the way up to 1877, every ship he was ever on. I went through his logbooks to see what I could learn, and I learned a lot. And we learned a lot about his activities during the Civil War by mining those logbooks. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of secondary literature on his career. If there is, it's stuff I've written in genealogy newsletters and so forth. There's not much else. Now,
how long ago did you visit you said you had gone to the Naval Observatory and came across his journals and that type of thing? How long ago did you do that?
Okay, those journals are all in the National Archives, which is downtown Washington. I was doing that 2016, 17, 18, more 18, 19. Then when I got indication there was this pandemic maybe coming toward us, or at least there's something not pleasant coming our way, I redoubled my effort getting in the archives. And I really, instead of just going there once a week, I went twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, junking in as much information as I could. Which meant I was photographing journal after journal after journal, so I could bring it home and have that ready to work on it at home. And that turned out to be a pretty good decision because we all were. We were kind of sequestered for the duration. Mm-hmm. So that was my research in earnest really began about 2008, just after I retired from the Library of Congress. The in-depth research and traveling around and looking where his personal papers might be. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of them. He didn't leave any memoir. He did leave some letters and some family records, but there's not a lot. So we had to do a lot of piecing together of a lot of different sources.
Well, and what kind of stuff are you piecing together? When you talk about from a lot of different sources, are you talking about like after battle action reports, newspaper articles?
Oh, yeah, newspapers, of course, because newspapers don't always get it right,
Mhm.
but they give you an indication of what to look for in the official sources. So the logbooks were critical. He did write numerous reports after his various battles. What they wanted to know after the Battle of Hampton Roads is, how did that ironclad perform? And John, really dug into that. So he did write reports about that. Then they put him up in Brooklyn, New York, to oversee the construction of new ironclads. So he had a lot to say about that, because they really were not. They were cutting edge design, but the fabrication had a lot to be desired. Some of the design features were not so great. So they came up with a new class of ironclads by 1863, put him in command of one of them. And John wrote the chapter about that. So he was very influential in the ironclad production, but he's also very critical about them. And he wrote a lot of after action reports, considering he's in another battle, several other battles in South Carolina and Georgia, that were subjects of chapters that John wrote, but I can speak to them if he doesn't get in here on time. He gave me his permission.
Well, and you, when anybody looks up Admiral Worden, say something as simple as Wikipedia, there's a number of different things that are presented to you, about his history. Like we said when we first started talking, he was in the Navy for, let me pull this back up. He had a 52-year naval career, but then you start getting into some of these details, and I find them pretty fascinating. And so one thing I wanted to learn about was, apparently at the start of the Civil War, at the very start of the Civil War, maybe even some might argue before the start of the Civil War in 1861, supposedly he makes a run to Pensacola, Florida, to deliver some secret dispatches, which prevented this fort from falling to the Confederates.
That's right.
And then that I mean, what can you tell me about that? Because then that leads to something else that I find really, really interesting. So what can you tell us about that? Was he wasn't like a spy per se, but
no, not at all. No, yeah. In fact, he was in his Navy uniform the whole time.
Oh, okay.
That was a point of honor with him. We were not at war yet, but there were two forts. Everybody knows about Fort Sumter. I assume you know that much about your Civil War.
All right, that was funny.
What's kind of lost in our historical memory is there were two forts that were under threat. The other was Fort Pickens, and the Navy had sent to both forts offshore were ships full of troops to land there. They didn't land at Sumter. They kind of had a change of heart and went back up to New York. But at Fort Pickens, the ships were still there. And so Worden was ordered by the Secretary of the Navy to carry a secret dispatch, which the dispatch was telling the captain of the Navy ship down there off at Fort Pickens, Pensacola, to land those troops. And so he proceeded by train. I think he took something like 3 different trains. In those days, there was no direct route get Pensacola. And he traveled in his uniform. He knew that was a point of honor. We weren't at war yet. But he got partway there. I think he's down in Alabama, and he was in a train car with a bunch of rebel soldiers. And they're talking about Pensacola, and they're talking about what we're going to go and seize the fort there. And so he took the orders. He memorized the orders. They were fairly succinct, I think. And then he destroyed them by going to the restroom and flushing them down the toilet. And they were gone. Now, that proved to be an important action to take, because once he got to Pensacola, he met with General Bragg, who was now the Confederate general there in charge. And they sort of a truce with the Navy ships and the soldiers at Fort Pickens. And if you don't land those troops, then you won't have any trouble from us. We're kind of a truce there. But Bragg asked Worden, well, are you carrying any dispatches? He said, no. Truthfully, he said, no. And so he met the Navy captain. He gave the orders, verbal orders from the Secretary of Navy. He returned to shore. He said, should I go see General Bragg? They said, forget about General Bragg. You don't need to talk to him. he got on the train. He's on the train heading to Montgomery, Alabama to catch a different train heading north. And at the stop just before Montgomery, soldiers come on and arrest him, because by that time Bragg found out, wait, they landed those troops, and that guy Worden told them to do it. Arrest him. He's a traitor or whatever. So he was taken to Montgomery. He was put into the city jail. He was a prisoner there. He sent a letter and a telegram to his wife saying, I'm detained temporarily. I hope to see you soon. Well, it was 6 months later that he got released. He was allowed, the jailer's family had befriended him and brought him his meals, and he actually was able to go out and roam around, walk around the city of Montgomery somewhat at will. He finally was exchanged up at Hampton Roads for a Navy lieutenant who had been captured, and that was for the exchange agreement. A lieutenant for a lieutenant, you trade them. And he went north and to recover his health. 6 months in a prison situation wasn't good. His health was already not so great to start with.
What was he suffering from?
He had, as many naval officers had all sorts of kidney problems. They had, bad diet. The sailing ships were terrible places to be on board.
Oh.
We have in the back of our book, we have an appendix. Those that have the book can look at the list of all the ailments he had. But being incarcerated for 6 months was not good for anybody's health. But he was barely recovering, and he got new orders to go down to Washington. They want to talk to him again for another assignment.
So many would consider him to be the first Civil War prisoner then.
He is considered the first because it happened just as the war began. By the time he was taken prisoner, yes, he was the first Union Civil War prisoner.
I bet you they regretted that after the Battle of Hampton Roads. I bet you that jailer regretted releasing him or trading him for another lieutenant.
Well, let's get
more famous than the man that got released. The exchange move.
Yeah, let's get into the Battle of Hampton Roads, because many people know it as, well, I always knew it as the Monitor versus the Virginia.
Yeah, well,
if he was the guy that helped to lead the Navy from the sailing age to the ironclad, technology, was he immediately after he was released? Was he immediately put in place as the captain of the Monitor?
He was released in November, and he got his orders within about 2 weeks. And he was up in Dutchess County, New York. He headed south, get his orders, and then to Brooklyn to inspect the ship. And he wrote reports. This was so valuable. He did write a lot of official reports, and he basically said, "Yeah, this is I think we can do something with this ship. It's an experimental ship. It's very odd. Look at it. Nothing was ever seen like that before."
No.
And he said,
was he still a lieutenant when he took over?
Pardon me?
Was he still a lieutenant when he took over?
Yes, he was still a lieutenant. He'd been lieutenant since 1846.
Wow. That does lead to a question. Why in particular do you think he was chosen to command this new experimental vessel? Was there any particular reason, or did they just say, oh, this guy's available, he did some good work, let's choose him?
Well, I think a little bit of that. Yeah, he's available. He does good work. Let's use him. But also, he had a scientific mind. This is definitely a scientific ship. It was very innovative, full of. John Erickson, the designer, had some, I don't know, like 30 some patents he got associated with this very ship. So it's very, very innovative. And I think because of his experiences in the Mexican War, and he also has been involved in other scientific activities besides the Naval Observatory. That as a science officer, let's put a science officer in charge. A scientific officer generally wasn't going to get command of a regular Navy ship, but this is not a regular Navy ship. This is a real oddity, if you will.
Yeah, real
So I think
experiment.
for a variety of reasons, he was chosen for the job. He was singled out and recommended by others who knew him, said he's the man for the job.
Mhm.
And as always, he was a man. I'll do my duty. Yes, sir. You want me to do that? I'll do it. But then he
Mhm.
reported back, yes, I can really do it. I think the ship is something we can work with.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff did he write in his journals, or was he actually recording in his journals at the time when he was put in place on the Monitor?
But most of these technical reports about the construction, the construction was done Greenport ship, excuse me, in a private shipyard in Brooklyn, and built by a private company. It didn't get turned over to the Navy till later. And of course, he didn't have any control over that ship till the Navy had control of it. Once they turned it over to got commissioned, then he could write reports. On what kind of armament needed. They hadn't thought too hard about that, frankly. They needed a crew. I mean, he had to go out and find volunteers to serve on the ship.
Mhm.
And when he told them what it was, well, some still volunteered. When they came on board with him and saw what it was, some immediately abandoned ship. They took off.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, you can imagine. Take one look at this. This is not. Look at this in your picture. The sailing ship over there. That's what they thought they were getting into in the Navy.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
look at the Monitor. My gosh, it's mostly below water. It's made of iron. It's
So
only got two guns.
did you have access, Robert? Please tell me in the affirmative. Did they have the ship plans, the blueprints? Has that been saved at the National Archives? Did you have access to anything, that primary source material of?
Yeah, fortunately, yes, the blueprints that
Oh my
are
God.
there. Yes,
That
and
is
those
awesome. That is awesome.
and because of that, they're down at the Mariners Museum at Newport News. They've recreated a full-scale replica of the ship, just the outside, not the insides of it.
Mhm.
So because they have these very precise plans,
Oh
and of
my
course
God.
now the Mariners Museum has the turret, has the guns, has the engines, has the keel and the anchor, many other artifacts. They can match those up against those plans. The plans were, they're engineering drawings. They're very precise.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah. Plus, they also have at the National Archives. They have the Monitor, the logbook of the Monitor.
Mhm.
So that also has interesting technical details. Not so much about the ship, but about the voyage it was on from Greenpoint, Brooklyn, New York, down to Hampton Roads. It almost sank twice on the way down.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It was not a seagoing ship.
Yeah, that actually leads. There was someone in the comments who said that. So is this the start of the brown water U.S. Navy?
That's a very good question, because these monitors were really built for harbor defense, or they thought the Navy, Secretary of Navy, thought, well, these also could be used to attack the Confederate forts in the South. So yeah, they're more suitable for rivers and harbors. Although because they had somewhat of a deep draft, because they're almost all underwater, they couldn't get into some rivers and harbors. Well, neither could those big sailing ships. But yeah, that's a fair question about the brown water. They were not built for seagoing. Although later they did build some seagoing monitors, but not this first one. Absolutely not.
I remember years ago in the news when they actually found the turret, or maybe they had always known where it was, but then they decided to raise it.
Well, they did not always know where it was. They knew it approximately, and it actually took a team of midshipmen working with some technology specialists, midshipmen of the United States Naval Academy, looking at currents, looking at winds, looking at storm data to begin to pinpoint where the Monitor went down. They've been searching for it for years and years and years using old-fashioned methods. But by using technology, they finally found it. Divers went down. Okay, here it is. And eventually they brought up the turret. The first thing it brought up, I think, was the anchor, the propeller, and the anchor, and then the turret was very delicate because when the ship sank on December 31st, 1862, it basically flipped over. When it hit bottom, it was upside down, so the turret was underneath the deck part of the ship. So it was a very difficult job to extract that turret and raise it without losing it again. And that's all really well recorded at the Mariners Museum with videos. And
What year was that?
that they brought the turret up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you the exact year. John could tell you the day and the hour, but I want to say around 2000, 2001, 2.
Oh, okay. I was going to guess maybe a little later. So it was a good 20
too much
years.
later. It might have been a tiny bit later. But if John jumps in, he could feel. I'm sorry, I just don't have that.
2002, it looks like.
2002.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, John beat me to it.
Well, so you had mentioned they had pulled up the propeller and the anchor, and so what was that like being a Worden? Did they contact your family and said, "Hey, we're pulling up pieces from the Monitor and we'd like to have you on hand," or did they just ignore you?
Well, no, we've been going down to the Mariners Museum on and off for years, so we're sort of a little bit in touch. I've been down in, I think, 1997, first time I went down, they had a reenactment of the Battle of Hampton Roads. They had little model ships of the Virginia and the Monitor they took out on the river. And so we started getting involved. I say we, my family and I. And so we were in contact with people, but and we followed it closely. But no, we didn't get a phone call saying we're bringing up the turret. But we followed it. It was in the news media. And I clipped all this stuff. It's all a lot of files on that.
I bet.
Well, the reason I ask is, people like Shane, John, Connor, they all work as curators, and they all work really hard to get the families of or descendants of people that served on the ships that they, work on, to get them involved. And that's why I was asking the question. I wanted to find out if the museum actually got you involved in that process. And if so, what was that like?
Well, I want to say we didn't get too much involved in the process about the Monitor. We did get involved many years earlier when they were constructing the USS Worden #4. There have been 3 previous Worden ships. That was being constructed at Bath, Maine. We were invited to the laying of the keel.
Okay.
Also invited to the commissioning of the ship at the Boston Navy Yard in 1963. And so that was definitely where the family's involved then. So they knew about us, and we were in contact, and more or less been on and off in contact ever since. And I've been down to the Mariners Museum doing research on it because they have some of his Worden's papers down there.
Here's a question.
Go ahead.
It's from Gregory there. Greg, they used rails to cover the ship.
I believe that was the Virginia.
That's right. It was the Virginia.
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. No, the Monitor wasn't like that.
No, all the elements of the Monitor were all crafted at various iron foundries throughout New York State, even in Baltimore. I was surprised. I found, being sort of an upper South state, they fabricated some of the iron pieces. Buffalo, New York, Troy, New York, Brooklyn, Manhattan, many different ironworks, and everything was custom made. In order to make that turret, those plates had to be rounded. And that's not something just anybody could do, even then. Now in the South, they didn't have any of those capabilities, so they used the different kind of iron from railroad tracks, and other iron as well.
You can see in this image that I grabbed for the thumbnail. Yeah, you're right. That's all got to be curved. And how thick was it? It had to be really, really thick.
That total, again, John could give you down to the millimeter, but I want to say almost 12 inches of thickness. Because that turret was taking shot, banging into it. Now that particular photograph you show there, just to the right, lower right of the gun that's sticking out, you see a little bit of a dent.
Yeah.
There were all sorts of dents in the turret. I think Worden is kind of standing in front of some of them, but they took a lot of shots into the turret. And of course, one hit the pilot house where he was there. He was wounded, grievously wounded toward the end of the battle.
That does lead me to ask something. When I was a teenager, I read a lot of books about this engagement, and a lot of books stopped talking about Worden after he gets injured. Immediately after the battle, what was he doing? Like, did he stay with Monitor long? Was he then like you did mention he was transferred to a new location, but how long was he with Monitor after the battle?
Good question. Yeah.
About 2 hours.
What? That's it?
Well, he was grievously wounded. He was in the pilot house looking out through these little slits. And the pivot gun at the stern of the Virginia got a lucky shot, and they hit the pilot house right at those little slits. Well, that sent in fragments of iron and powder and heaven knows what else. So he was blinded and fell back. Men came, they took him to his cabin. He said, I'm dying. This is it. He called down his executive officer, Samuel Dana Green, said, Lieutenant Green, you are in charge now. And Green said, okay, what are my orders? He said, well, defend the Minnesota, which is USS Minnesota, which is that ship sitting out there like a royal target. And so Green did take the ship back into battle, but by that time, the Virginia, the tide was going down, the Virginia was going back up the Elizabeth River. So that the battle more or less was a draw. I think most historians consider it as a draw. Now, Worden was taken off the ship as soon as he got ashore by a friend of his, been a shipmate for many years on and off, Lieutenant Henry Augustus Wise. And Wise at that time was stationed in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Navy Yard. He took Worden, his friend, took him to his home in Washington so his wife and family could nurse him back to health. He was there for about 3 months until he managed to recover his eyesight. But on the day they brought him to Washington, he's with Wise, Lieutenant Wise. Wise's home was right near the White House. Wise ran across to the White House, entered the White House. You could do that in these days. Now you get shot. Anyway, he ran into the White House. Lincoln's having a cabinet meeting. He interrupts the cabinet meeting and reports about the Battle of Hampton, what happened in the battle against the Merrimack, as they all were calling it at that time. And Lincoln says, and this is sort of a quote, well, I want to go see that feller. And so Lincoln and Wise jog on back to Wise's house, and Lincoln comes into the bedroom where Worden's laying there. He's prostrate on a bed. He's bandaged up. He can't see anything, in tremendous pain. And Lincoln comes goes into his room and says, well, Lieutenant Worden, it's a great honor for me to be here and to see you. And Worden said, no, the honor is all mine, Mr. President. You shouldn't have taken time from your busy day. He said, well, so then Lincoln said, well, tell me about that battle. So Lincoln sits down on Worden's bed with him and here's all the gory details about the battle. No, unfortunately, a lot of that conversation, it's not recorded. But Wise's daughter, Charlotte, she was about 11 years old at the time, and she was kind of eavesdropping. So a lot of the information we have about that is from Charlotte Wise. So thank heaven, she was a very, very observant young lady. So Worden recovered, and he went about in D.C., went to Congress and met with congressmen and so forth. And then he went. His wife had come to also take care of him. And then he went out to Michigan. His parents had moved to Michigan in the 1840s. He went to see his mother. His father was deceased by then. They went to visit his mother. And then he just got back to his wife's home turf in Dutchess County, New York, Quaker Hill, New York. And he got orders to report to Brooklyn Navy Yard. And there he began to oversee the construction of more monitors.
For those of you just joining us, we are talking with Robert Worden, co-author of the book From Ironclads to Admiral, the story of John Lorimer Worden and naval leadership. John Worden, famously captain of the USS Monitor. And Robert, this book just was published at the beginning of this year, correct?
Oh, even more recent than that. April 15th is the publication date.
Wow.
So it's not even a month ago.
Not even a month. Oh, okay. Fantastic. So if you're at all interested in getting a copy of this book, there should be a link to this book in the description of this video below. Definitely check it out. I started off tonight by saying I didn't know much about the Civil War in comparison to World War II. And it's a fascinating story about, well, the captain of the USS Monitor.
Yes, there was a question about what was the draft of the Monitor?
Oh, yeah, there sure was. Hold on a second. Where was that?
Eric, it's like the last comment. Yeah,
I got it.
Thanks, Connor. Yeah, what was the draft of the Monitor?
I'm sorry. That's a John Quarstein question.
He's here.
He is?
Yeah.
Now, maybe one of you can look it up there on the
Oh, yeah,
Wikipedia.
he just joined. There he is.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was
Hold
a
on.
hard one.
Oh,
John,
John,
what's the draft of the
John, thanks for
Monitor?
joining us. We're happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, we can hear you loud and clear. And since you just joined us at the right time. Are you ready to answer a quiz question?
Sure, I can.
Just
I
jump
think
right
I
in.
know a little bit about the Monitor.
Go ahead, Connor. Pull that one up.
yes. So the question was, what is the draft of the Monitor?
10 feet 6 inches.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very nice.
That's
Yeah,
so yeah.
essentially what the Slater
That's
is.
pretty simple.
Wow.
Wait, really?
Yeah. I mean, that's what made it able to go over shoals during the Battle of Hampton Roads, whereas the Virginia, with a draft of 22 feet, could not. And so Virginia had to be in the channel, and then the Monitor could kind of run circles around it and everything, but the Virginia was a very unwieldy ship. Took a half hour to turn it around. So I guess
that must have been so agonizing for the sailors aboard Virginia to have to wait half an hour to get around again. I was about to ask a question though. Obviously, Monitor did not last long after the battle. She unfortunately did eventually flounder. Is there any written reaction to Borden's reaction to learning that the Monitor had sunk?
say that. What type of reaction?
Is there any surviving reaction? Like, did he write something, or is there any document? Yeah.
Worden was not on the Monitor when it sank.
No, I meant, but did he find out that she sunk, and did he react at all to learning about that?
He does not react in a major way. He finds out when the Montauk gets to Beaufort, North Carolina. And that's where they tell him, because the Rhode Island had already gone down there. And so he was not a voracious writer, as Robert can attest to.
Yes.
So I can't remember anything that he said that would excite people reciting it. You know,
Okay,
now the crew members of the Monitor, I could tell you a lot of things that they said, and the survivors were just, the horror of that night is unbelievable. And it's 30-foot seas, you got 18-inch freeboard, you're being towed, you got to cut the tow. Your ship is built in 3 parts: the turret, the iron deck, and then a hull. But the big trouble is the armored deck overhangs the hull. So every time a wave brings you up, smashes you back down. And so that hull is attached to the armored deck by 2 rows of bolts all the way around. And so many of the crew members said they thought the ship would fall apart before it sank. And so, yeah, everyone says Ericsson's brilliant, but as Robert knows, I have some issues with him, and that's a whole nother story we can talk about, because he's because our hero, or John Worden, will actually encounter Ericsson several times thereafter, when not only his service on the Montauk, more importantly, when he's at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, studying, surveying the new ironclads that are being built.
Yeah, we were just getting to that part of his story when you joined us.
Okay.
So
So we were getting to the point where he was recovering. He had met with Lincoln, and I guess my question at this point was, did he consider these ironclads to be a success?
I would have to say that Ericsson thought they were poorly made, that they were dangerous, that they were shock-proof but lacked firepower, and they were unsafe to go to sea. There's no way you can get around it. It didn't have the motive power strong enough to handle sea under its own power. And because it didn't have enough power, it didn't have good steering. So you can well imagine adding all those things up, along with the limited freeboard, along with, there's no rubber between sealing things, right? And so it is going to leak. And if you put oakum in certain things, that oakum is going to wash away. Just think of a 30-foot wave, and what that does to any type of ship. A Monitor, the waves goes over it and drops down on it. Then the next wave brings it up and bounces it down.
Mm-hmm.
So Worden, he survived the trip to Hampton Roads in the Monitor coming down. Mm-hmm. He makes comment about what I just said, the poor steering, the limited engine power, etc. And so when they build the Passaic class, they don't listen to anybody. In fact, Samuel Francis DuPont is going to say, because Worden writes DuPont about the weaknesses of Monitor, and DuPont say, if these men of genius would only listen to the men who use their creations, and they didn't. And so that's one of my favorite quotes by DuPont, anyway. But
you had mentioned briefly that Worden wasn't maybe that prolific with his writing, but some of the other crew members were. And yes. Was there a particular crewman that was really outspoken? Obviously, after the battle, he's not taking notes during the battle, but did anyone write a book, or how did you hear about what these crewmen had to say?
Well, many of them wrote letters home. Probably the most articulate of them is a man known as William Keeler. And he actually describes the sinking in a most powerful way. And he's writing to his wife. And so he writes his wife every day. So, he's telling what it's like when it's in summer. The flies are in the Monitor, the heat. In fact, he writes one time, "I'm sorry that the ink is running, but it's my sweat," But he tells great stories. And George Gear is a fireman. He tells pretty good stories. Jeff Driscoll, Ambrose Driscoll, excuse me, he will tell some very good stories. There's an oral history project that happens in the 1890s, and he actually writes his story down. Now, he's not good with English or spelling, but when you get through it all, you realize that's why he deserted. He deserted the Monitor in October of 1862. In August. Oh, wait a second. October 1862. So I just gave a lecture on Mobile Bay, so trying to get myself back in the right time period.
No worries.
When you look at this picture here, obviously you've got the Monitor in the foreground, the Virginia just behind it, and then in the background you've got the sailing vessel, the Minnesota. So did a lot of the crewmen in their letters look at this as just awful duty, an awful assignment?
What, to be serving on an ironclad?
Yeah.
Many of them will write home how terrible it is, but most of them, like Samuel, Dana Green, William Keeler, they are so proud of what they did. They believe they saved the nation. On the Virginia, these guys go back and they say, well, we whipped the Monitor, we damaged it. Plus, the day before, we sank 2 major warships, sank 2 merchant ships. We damaged 2 other major capital ships and damaged 2 armed tugboats. So back in the old days, if I sink more ships than you do, who wins the battle? Right? And so they have a sense of pride. And one of the things that's so funny, or maybe not so funny, but in the post-war era, everyone's claiming to serve on the Virginia. Everyone's claiming to serve on the Monitor. And they come up with some of the wildest stories. There's one man, I can't remember his name right now, but he lives in Sioux City, Iowa afterwards. And he was on the Monitor from the Washington Navy Yard, that's November, until it sank. So, but he tells this, he used to go to classrooms and tell the story of the Battle of the Ironclads. And, he said, I was there during the battle and blah, blah, blah. I was there when Worden was wounded. And he had a fistula in his nose. So then he'd take a draw out of his cigarette and hold his nostrils, and the smoke went out of that fistula. That was a shrapnel that hit me,
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of crazy, some of the things they come up with. But,
yeah. On the top. Sorry, go ahead.
And the big thing is, I fought in Hampton Road. That made every man who was there proud. And actually, William Keeler will say, it's not fighting the vessel that made us heroic. It was surviving the vessel at sea. That kind of makes me worried, I gave a lecture some time ago, and Robert watched it, and I talked to Robert right after it, because Robert and I are very good friends. Even though we wrote a book together, we didn't try to shoot each other and anything. But he asked me, he said, so I think you would have deserted the Monitor, wouldn't you? And I said, take him right. First sight of it, yeah. So
I think the life was pretty hand to mouth back then, especially during the war, right? So I don't think they didn't have the luxury of forecasting out. So it seems though, when you're just talking about the individuals writing the letters and the warts, so to speak, of the Monitor, did they really know that they were, that probably wasn't on their mind, that they were making naval history and charting the course for the next 50 years of shipbuilding? Unless, what do you think about that?
Sam and Dan Green knew they had made history. He knew he had saved, because he replaces Worden after Worden is wounded. And he writes in his letters afterwards that, hey, we saved the nation. And that everyone in Hampton Roads gave him great accolades, that he did the right thing by not following the Virginia into the Elizabeth River, but protecting the Minnesota. So he talks about it, and so does Keeler, Gear, Driscoll, and everybody else who says anything. That they were a great ship because they stopped the terrible monster, the Merrimack. Right?
Yeah, but that's in hindsight. I mean, are there any letters, beforehand? Any of them basically, for all intents and purposes, basically saying to their friends and family, "This sucks. It's hot. You know, it doesn't go very fast. We can't even go out to sea because it's going to sink. You know, did you get any feeling like that from the letters before the Battle of Hampton Roads?
Well, Driscoll has a great quote, and I wish I had my Monitor boys with me, but I sold them all at this lecture, so I have to do this by memory. But Driscoll said when they left the Brooklyn Navy Yard, all ships that left the Navy Yard, crew members of the other ships there would line up on the masts and everything and cheer the ship leaving. They did not do that for the Monitor. In fact, Driscoll talked about people saying, go on with your iron coffin, you'll never amount to a thing, and stuff like that. So that, and Driscoll's remembering this, but it doesn't sound like he was depressed about what they were saying. But I think one of the saddest stories connected to the crew and the Monitor is going to be about a man known as Jacob Nicholas, who had joined the crew at the Washington Navy Yard. And when they get orders to go south, he actually writes his father that we have been ordered south where we get to see action, and that all the old salts are worried about us going around Cape Hatteras, but I think we'll be just fine. Now, Nicholas is one of those that went down with the ship. And it's and the real sailors knew what Cape Hatteras was. Nicholas did not. I mean, he lived on the Lake Erie before the war. You know, he sailed down. He just hadn't been a real big time sailor. He was to go on the Monitor by his friend Isaac Scott. So, I wouldn't listen to Isaac Scott anymore, but so
there's a famous photo, and forgive me if it's not the Monitor, but I think there's a story around. There's a shot of some of the crew on the deck, and there's like a little young African American boy sitting on the deck.
That's the Monitor, and that's the Monitor. That man is not this picture. No, it's but that black man is Siah Carter, who was a contraband who joined the crew. Now, they had lots of contrabands coming up to the Monitor, and they said, get away from here. But Siah Carter comes up, and they ring their battle rattles, and everyone points muskets at poor old Siah Carter, and he goes, I just want my freedom. My master is Colonel Hill Carter, owner of Shirley Plantation, and I want to serve to free my fellow man. And so they found him as a boy number one, and so that's the man that's in that picture, which we're very lucky we have that. So now he doesn't write about his experience. Many of the people on the Monitor, however, when his wife tries to get, Siah Carter's pension, she can't get it because he had changed his name for his non-slave last name. And so, they didn't know who he was. They said that no one like that was on the Monitor. So I think about 7 crew members all wrote notes. Yes, he was there. Yes, he did this. Yes, he was great. And so his wife deserves the pension. And so she got it. And so we know a little bit about what he did on the ship. So, but not that much.
Thank you.
We've been talking to Robert Worden and
Mustard document.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been talking to Robert Worden and John Quarstein, author of From Ironclads to Admiral. They're writing about John Lorimer Worden, who was the captain of the USS Monitor. And we've had you guys on for an hour. It's been interesting learning about this little bit of history. John, Shane, Connor, any last questions for John or Robert before we let them go?
So I do have a couple questions. Now, obviously, we've been talking about the Monitor, and he's still a lieutenant. Well, Admiral, when did that come around? Was that post-war? Was that peacetime? I know, Robert, you said you specialized in his life sort of post-war.
Right.
What was his life like after the Civil War? And was he involved with the later advancements that the United States Navy would see into the sort of post-Civil War era, but before the Olympia era, like the 1890s and stuff? So
Right.
was he involved with any of that afterwards?
Well, yeah, after the war, at the end of the war, he was still overseeing ironclad production. Then he made one more voyage around Cape Horn to the Pacific coast to deliver another ship, to be a flagship out there. Then he was given a leave of absence for 6 months, extended later to a year. He went to Germany and Saxony, in the Kingdom of Saxony, to recover his health once again. And during that time, he was given a new appointment. He was promoted to Commodore, from captain to Commodore, and he was given a new appointment to be superintendent of the United States Naval Academy. He came back in 1869, and he did that for nearly 5 years. He's at the Naval Academy. And since you mentioned the Olympia, one of his immediate officers working closely with him, sort of the chief of staff for him, was George Dewey. So he, as superintendent of the Naval Academy, he had a charge of the curriculum to help move the Navy from steam sailing ships and steamships to ironclads and into the Iron Navy, into the modern Navy. It also was a time of budget cuts. And so the Navy is kind of in doldrums. So he and other officers of the Naval Academy established the United States Naval Institute, which became a think tank for, in the post-war period, let's get some new ideas on how our Navy should be constructed, how it should be operated, what kind of a Navy do we need? It's the same kind of thing the Naval Institute is doing today. And in honor of his being superintendent, being the founder of the Naval Institute, he became member number 1 of the United States Naval Institute. And I joined the Naval Institute some years ago, and I want to tell you that I am member number 11,008,917, and I've been a member for a while. So he's number 1. So we're quite proud of that. After the Naval Academy, he became the commander of the U.S. Naval Forces in Europe. They had a squadron in Europe. He had about 5 ships under his command, and he was quite a hero going around the different nations. He was well recognized for his heroics. And we've missed entirely in this discussion the attacks on Fort McAllister, on capturing, on sinking the Nashville, which was a Confederate commerce raider. You came up on the screen a couple times, a ship burning with a monitor in the background.
Yes. Hold on.
Another heroic activity of his. He ended his career in Washington, D.C., working at the Navy. This picture. There's the Nashville. There's the Montauk behind, and Fort McAllister, I think, is somewhere in that. Yes, in that picture too.
Off to the right.
Yes, off to the right, and he took his monitor right up close to Fort McAllister. It took many hits, blasted the heck out of the fort, but it was only an earthen fort, so it really didn't do any substantial damage. But he got the Nashville. It was coming down the river. It got stuck in the shoals there, and he drilled it with their hot shot and other fun. But he ended his career in Washington, D.C., and died there in 1897. And they had a state funeral for him. He's one of the last great Civil War heroes to die. President McKinley and cabinet members and Supreme Court, et cetera, all came to his funeral.
There was another picture that you guys had provided. Let me see if I can find it here. This one right here.
Yes.
It looks like it says USS Pensacola in the lower right-hand corner.
Yes.
Indeed, that is.
He commanded.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, he commanded, but one of the big things is during the war, they were all questioning Benjamin Isherwood about how well he was designing engines. So this crackpot lawyer designed what was called the Dickinson engines, and the Pensacola was fitted with them. And they were so bad, Worden says, take them out. In fact, he surveyed another ship, the Idaho, which was designed by Henry Steers, but got engines, Dickinson-style engines. And once again, Worden, after going on a short cruise, says, take the engines out and use that space so it can be a store ship. So Worden is really being one of the forceful naval officers in dealing with this different type of technology, not just iron, but also the steam motive power. And so that's why he's standing there proudly, because he had taken that ship around the Horn despite its earlier problems, which during the voyage he fixed and before they left the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So he was a brilliant person, and every assignment he's given, he does it to his utmost. And that's why they like to say, let Worden do it.
Which one is he in this picture? Is he the one that's kind of in the center leaning against the railing, or is he the one to the right?
He's the one in the center of the picture with his head bent forward slightly near the capstan.
I see. Like right in the foreground.
That's him. Over
He's got
there.
the big beard.
Yeah.
That's the big giveaway is his huge beard.
Okay.
Yeah. Back when sailors were allowed to wear beards on U.S. ships.
Yeah, they all had some kind of facial hair of some kind or another.
Yeah.
Um,
And Robert found that picture, and it's a great one for.
It is a really nice photo. You really kind of get the sense of the size of the vessel from this shot, and you see all the crew like just taking the opportunity to get their face in the photo.
Robert, where'd you find the picture?
Oh, it's the Naval History and Heritage Command has a digital archive, and they had identified it as a much later picture, but they had it at Mare Island Navy Yard, and about a year later than Worden was there. But when studying this picture, and I was able to identify some of the other men standing there, and I said, "No, this is our guy," and the timing was right. They had just miscatalogued it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It happens.
So you had no doubt that was Worden.
Well, based on other photography we have of him, yes, that was our finding. Yeah,
I knew it was when Robert sent me the picture. So it's Robert's a great researcher. I'm just going to say.
When I heard, or when you relayed the story about when you two teamed up to write the book, and again, we're talking to John and Robert, co-authors of From Ironclads to Admiral. What was it like? I'm just really curious. I don't know why, but what was it like trying to team up and write a book during the pandemic? That had to be challenging.
Well, I think Robert had done so much research on our hero's earlier career, because he's a Worden family member, that he had brought together all this great information. Then, because I had written the Monitor Boys, I knew all about the Monitor and what he did on the Monitor. And then what about his wound and things like that. And so Robert and I went back and forth, trying to understand the ships he was involved with, his diseases. That's why we made those appendices. But when it really came down to it, we kind of split the book up. And I remember when we were at an event at the Mariners Museum, and I lamented to Robert that I had to write a book about Worden, that it would be a big task. And he said, well, I've got all this research about his early life. And I said, really? And then we just decided, like simultaneously, or like a light bulb went off. Well, let's write that book together. And then so my job was to write all the war stuff, and Robert had to write all the other. So it was pretty easy. And one of the best things that our writing styles meshed well enough that you can't really catch who's writing. And I don't know if that was the copy editor at the Naval Institute or just our good fortune in writing, but it was it was kind of amazing. So COVID, I think I only wrote one really good chapter, and I wrote another one about the Mexican War, and I threw all that away because I said, well, I'm talking too much about this. And Robert had found all these ship logs, and so I was able to glean them, and so I knew what Worden did during the Mexican War. It's pretty simple, and I think that's how we approached the entire book.
We worked very we worked very well together. We complemented each other with the war versus the non-war chapters, but we were on emails and back and forth phone calls, a couple of brief in-person meetings. But we're both very likable guys, we want you to know, and we got along. We get along very well, and we try to get along with everybody. And it made the book a pleasure to write with John. Believe me.
We're talking with John Quarstein and Robert Worden, authors of From Ironclads to Admiral. If you enjoy what Robert and John have joined us to talk about tonight, namely John Lorimer Worden, Admiral John Lorimer Worden, the link to this book is in the description of the video below. Strongly recommend you check it out. What projects are you guys working on next?
Well, I believe it or not, have been I've been creating a project about Nat Turner, because Nat Turner's rebellion took place 60 miles away from here, and I had the good fortune of restoring the last house where enslavers were killed by Nat Turner's followers, known as the Rebecca Vaughn House. I developed a trail. I found 40 sites related to Nat Turner, and then so it raised a bunch of money, and the house gets its final exhibit put in, I think, in the next 2 weeks, and then I'm building the visitor center. So we raised about $4.2 million to do that, and I did that on my part time, because the museum. I have to write all these blogs and give all these talks, and so, but it was something that had to be done, and I got asked by some of the community's leaders for me to do it, and so I couldn't say no. And so, but I'm also working on a book about the Battle of Mobile Bay, and I'm trying to lure Robert into thinking about what other book we should write. How's that, Robert?
Well,
you heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
Well, is that going to be your next project, Robert, or do you have your hands on other stuff?
Not my next project. I'm the editor of the Worden's Past quarterly genealogy newsletter for the Worden Family Association. There's a May issue, so we got to get that out. And then we were restricted how many. We were allowed some 90,000 words for our book. John and I probably wrote 300,000 words, had to cut it back. There's a lot of pieces to the book I would love to write publish an article about the lawsuits that he was involved in, at least 3. And he was sued twice, and he sued the U.S. government once. So those were kind of interesting to me, especially since the lawsuits here at the Naval Academy. And I really couldn't go into much detail in the book. It was kind of beyond they're mentioned, but not. You couldn't go into the gory details that. Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, but they were a lot of fun to read about.
Well, just briefly, why would anyone want to?
while learning about Worden when he's in Brooklyn Navy Yard the second time. It's amazing learning I did about greed, graft, and grift during the Civil War.
Oh,
And there's Worden watching it all and writing to people saying, hey, this is going on. And yet, one of Erickson's partners was a congressman that was on the House Committee on the Conduct of Naval Affairs. So, of course, they're getting more contracts to a ship that should have been designed very differently than it was. Erickson was not a sailor. Erickson was an engineer. So, he hadn't been to sea, but not in any major way. So I really think it's important to take that story and develop it even more myself. And so Robert and I are friends. So maybe we might write something together in the future. I think his wife would be okay with that. I don't know about your daughter, but
well, John Quarstein, Robert Worden, thanks for joining us tonight to talk about your book, From Ironclads to Admiral. I'll say it one last time. If you guys are interested in checking out this book, the link to purchase it is in the description below in this video. Definitely recommend it. And also want to thank you, John and Robert, for your time. You gave us, you were really generous with your time. We kicked off at 7. Now it's a 8:15. So we definitely appreciate you being so generous with your time.
Let's do it.
all right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us a little bit of history about the Civil War. And we are going to kick you off and talk behind your back. So,
Thank you.
For it.
yeah, both you gentlemen have a good evening.
You too.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was a twist.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was really interesting. It's like I started off by saying at the beginning of the video, I knew very little and continue to know very little about the Civil War compared to World War II. Heck, I could even say the same about, World War I. But, when I saw that this was going to be the next opportunity for us to interview somebody from the Naval Institute Press, I'm going, yeah, all right, this ought to be pretty good. And this Worden guy sounds like one heck of a character.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out, unfortunately, they have left the chat, but I have actually purchased the book in the time we've been talking.
Oh, no kidding,
so
really?
I'll be reading it in probably about a week.
Great.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
And
But go ahead.
I think it's also interesting how these guys teamed up. I didn't really know how to ask the question. I mean, obviously Robert being the descendant of John, so he handles the family side. But then you had John Quarstein, who knew all about the battles, kind of teaming up, collaborating to tell the story. So that is another reason I would say to grab the book, is that you're getting two experts from two totally different fields. One, obviously related to the guy, and then two, John Quarstein being an expert on the actions. So I thought that was an interesting way to write the book.
I mean, how else can you do it? You got the one guy, as you just said, who's a family member. You have the other guy who actually wrote a book already about the Monitor Boys, I think he called it, right? And it's a perfect blending.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating way to do it.
Now, do you remember the number that? Because I had to leave.
You know what? I saw you put your glasses on. I knew you're digging into your wallet. So he was 11 million. He was member number 11 million and something. And but what are you?
I'm 11,028,235.
11,028,235.
If it goes like, it's back. It's upside down or backwards.
Yeah, no worries.
But if it's just based on, the number, the sequential order, right?
Wait, hold that up to the screen one more time.
Well, it's backwards, isn't it?
No,
it's not.
11.
Oh, it is to me.
Oh, yeah. That could be 11 million. Yeah, 28,235. Huh. Yeah. Okay.
I think he was like in the 16. I think he was like in the 16,000s. I don't remember. We'll need to watch this back after the episode's done.
All right. Let's see. Let's move on to seeing what's going on in your guys' backyard. Shane Stevenson, curator of the Buffalo and Erie County Naval and Military Park. Hold on a second, Shane. I'm going to pull up your backdrop. And go.
And I'm done. No.
Yeah. Right.
No, I mean, we're in our season now. I mean, we're having working parties up the wazoo lately, which has been great.
Tell us about the camera.
Tell you about the camera. Yeah. So we do have that live feed camera now. That's stationary. All right. So I've been working on that with about 4 different IT companies for about a year, and it finally went up maybe almost 3 weeks ago now. And, it is pretty interesting. So it will get more interesting as the season goes on and as we have ceremonies and just a lot more people wandering around. And so happy to do it. If you've checked in, it's always live. It's gone down, I think, 4 times in almost the 3 weeks that it's been up, but I'm checking that thing, I'm checking it every 3 hours or so. And so if I notice that it goes down, I immediately send an email to the IT people, and then they bring it back up, within a relative. Now, if it goes down at 3 o'clock in the morning, it might be down until 10 o'clock that following morning, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's going great. It's gotten a lot of views so far, and live feed. Thank you, Eric. Go Sabres. And, but yeah, I mean, we're having working parties every day this week. We have 2 working parties next week. So we've really ramped up. What is going on with this picture? How old is this? This picture is really old. Where did you get this from? I mean, that area in the background that's all like dug up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where's the building? Where's the restaurant?
I mean, that's like, that's 2000.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want a new picture posted?
No, I
Maybe
do
you
not.
should
It is
send me
fine.
one instead of leaving me to dig one up off of your Facebook page.
It is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Speaking of the live stream, I was telling Ken before we came on that I have looked at your live stream a few times. And there was one time where I saw you, Shane, kind of crossing over to Little Rock.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
oh, there he is. It's Shane in the wild.
I know. I'm waiting for someone to say Shane sighting or something like that, like in the comments.
Is it pointed at the fantail of the Sullivans or the Little Rock?
I'm sorry?
Is it pointed at the fantail of the Sullivans or the Little Rock?
It's pointed at both, actually.
Oh, it covers both. So people
see both.
so Connor can see you actually go to work every morning with your coffee.
So this picture is probably from 2002, 2003.
Okay.
Which is fine. It's a nice shot.
No, I heard some complaining.
Yeah, not from me, bro.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but other than that, I mean, we're getting into full swing, working parties all the time. We're seeing maybe 50, depending during the week, about 50 visitors a day. I've met Chopper 73 from Australia. You're came around.
Me. What's that guy like?
Oh, it's fabulous. He was doing this really long. So he was leaving after with his family to go, they were here for Niagara Falls and us. I walked him around, gave him about a 2-hour tour. And then he was going to the U505 in Chicago. So his family spent about a month here on a long vacation. And it was just really nice. He brought me an HMAS Perth hat, a frigate.
Oh, nice.
Really? Which I loved. Yeah, that was really nice. Oh, and he gave something to Stephen too. But so yeah, it was really cool. I think we might have 1 or 2 other subscribers coming up to visit, and
fantastic.
So, and Cece says she enjoys the live stream almost daily.
Almost daily.
Yeah. So, but thank you. We're doing the World of Warships this Sunday night. So if anyone is going to be watching The Longest Night at the Museum, I have a 20-minute video on the Little Rock that's going from 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then there's a 20-minute Q&A after that. So if you are registered with the World of Warships Longest Night at the Museum, you can check into all of it, and I recommend that. But I'll be on... my mug will be on from 7 to 7:20 after the premiere of the Little Rock video.
And that's that's this Sunday.
Correct.
So that was Eastern time.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. All right.
Fantastic.
Shane Stevenson, curator at the Buffalo and Erie County Naval and Military Park. Check out their YouTube channel. Search for Buffalo Naval Park in the search bar, or check out the website, buffalonavalpark.org. Thank you, Connor, for pulling that up. Yep.
When you climbed the superstructure, was it aft?
Yeah.
Or was it the forward? Okay.
No, it was aft. So you see
didn't
the
even take them higher.
You see the 3 black towers. Okay. Yeah. And I don't want to hear it. Okay. It's the shortest of the 3 black towers, and I don't want to hear it. It was still super tall. So when you look at the 3rd black tower, the one most aft, that large platform is the one that we were on. Correct, Shane?
Yeah, the SPS 30 dish all the way in the back, where the receiver of the dish is pointing to the left side of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah. So climbing up there was a nightmare.
Yeah, it is scary, no doubt. I mean, it's because the ladders, if you climb vertical ladders in other ships, they're only about this wide, and it could be slippery, and because I think it was kind of in February or something.
It was December. Yeah, it was December.
It was cool. I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Video.
Yeah. So, all right, moving on to John Epp, curator, USS Slater in Albany, New York. John, let's pull up. Bear with me a second. I want to pull up the photos that you sent. And there we go. Oh, wait.
Wow, look at that shot. Great.
There we go. That's what I wanted.
We got to move us off so everyone can see it.
I'm on it.
Move us. There we go.
Wow.
So the Slater has entered into the mechanized robot Guardian universe. So at the Hensa Symposium last year aboard the Midway, the Lexington folks did a talk about this. They essentially created a character revolved around the Lexington and a bunch of merchandise, a comic book and stuff. So Shanna here at the Slater has been working on that for a few months. And we developed this character, this called the Steel Shepherd. So it's the essentially the Slater if it was a robot.
Who did the artwork?
So we'll see how it does. I'm sorry.
Who did the art? I mean, who generated this?
Oh, the company that worked with the Lexington, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we contracted with them to do it. So yeah, it's got the depth charges, you got the 40s, the 3-inch guns, the smokestack, the pod that has the mass. It's pretty neat. So right now we only have this design on stickers and T-shirts, all available on our website. You can buy them on our website, ussslater.org. If we sell enough, we'll start working on the comic book and get that published. Yeah.
Wow.
So we're excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's very interesting how museums, I'd say especially in the last 5 years, have looked at new ways of raising funds. And I found that only very recently have a couple of museums like the Lexington. Was it Lexington?
Yep.
You mentioned? Yeah, it was Lexington. Have kind of gone with almost incorporating themselves into sort of a fictional reality. It's a pretty unique concept as far as museum ships goes, and I'm going to be very interested to see how it evolves both with Slater and with any other ships that potentially follow through with it going forward.
I know there were a lot of other ships that were interested in doing it as well. I don't know if others have progressed. But so right now, all I know is Lexington and Slater that's done this. So forgive me if other ships have done that.
I haven't seen it yet.
You know what it kind of reminds me of, and Shane, maybe you can remind me of what it's called. But when we were down in Baton Rouge, Parks what was that called?
It's a Japanese.
Yes, it's a Japanese.
Well, that doesn't narrow it down.
And what they do is it's Japanese anime, and they've created characters that are based on, or they surround the Japanese ships during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And this sounds a lot like that, where obviously they're creating, I know you're not, well, they're creating these robotic characters. You're not allowed to use the other word, right? But you know, around the ship, and that's what it reminds me of. I wish I could remember what that was called.
Yeah, so like they're usually anime girls.
Oh,
right?
I know what this is. I know
And
what
so
it
they
is. It's
turn into the ship, and then they turn into a girl, and they do things. Yeah, Parks is really into that. So
yeah.
if Tim is watching, hello, Tim.
Well, wait a second. Is it Azure Lane, Santee 1821?
No. There's 3 or 4 of them. I know Parks has worked with Cancel before because I've seen his posts. So that's what
Cankly or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? It's like Cankly.
I'm pretty sure. It's Can something. I've seen him post about it before.
Okay. All right.
Well, I hope you guys at the Slater sell enough shirts and did you say coins or
Stickers?
Stickers.
So the shirts are $25 and the stickers are $5.
Gotcha.
I hope you guys sell enough to make it worth your while to do the book. I'd love to see that.
I hope so too. Yeah.
Yes.
And it looks like, based on the images that you sent, it looks like you guys have like big time volunteer activities going on.
Oh yeah, if you remember when we first started doing this, I would share photos of what was happening the previous month. I stopped doing that a while ago, but figured I'd start it again. So this 2 weeks ago was our spring work week. So that's the folks in the first picture you just showed, the group photo. Yep, on the folks. So came from around the country, Washington State, as places like that. So it was a lot of fun. They got a lot of work done. The weather was beautiful, no rain really. So a lot of chipping and painting, of course, like always.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you got to use a needle gun, you don't want it to be raining. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it looks like we did some deck painting, and it may not have been dry all the way, so we're gonna have to redo some deck painting.
Oh no!
It's not a lot. Yeah, some undersides of gun tubs. It's a lot of fun when they're around. There's Ron. Ron is the longest serving volunteer on the Slater. He started in 1995 when the ship was in New York City. His uncle served on a destroyer escort, the Reeves, in World War II. So he's seen the ships from New York City days to today.
So he started volunteering probably right after I was born. That's insane. That is amazing dedication right there.
Yeah. Always chipping and working on the deck, of course.
What's the deal with this photo here? I thought this one was kind of interesting. What's this little door go to?
Yeah, so that's up on the flying bridge. That is the door to the sound room. So the sound room on destroyer escorts were up on the flying bridge. That's where the guys just sitting there listening to the underwater noises. And that door is on rails, so to open it, it just slides. And and we've been in, it's all original doors and stuff up there. It's it's exposed. There's no overhead. There's no roof. So they're just trying to make it watertight. Unfortunately, the flying bridge, the past few years has taken a lot of beating and doesn't look very good. So that's going to be the topic of the next dry dock, most likely.
And then obviously you got volunteers for the food.
Oh my God. The reason our volunteers come back, even on a weekly basis, is the food. We're fortunate that we are able to cook in the galley. So Blair on the left there, who's peeling potatoes, he was in the Navy. He was on an aircraft carrier. What's McCann's aircraft carrier there?
McCain?
McCain in Vietnam.
Independence?
Forrestal.
Right.
Yeah, he served aboard the Forrestal. After the Navy, he became a cook. I think he had his own diner or catering business or something.
Perfect.
So he comes up for the week and cooks like full blown steak dinners. It's He spoils everybody.
Sounds like
Can I
it.
join your team?
Yeah, no kidding, right?
$15 a day to eat his food.
We saw that, and then
Yeah, so this is a shout out to Ed. He has been with us for a couple of years, volunteer. This was his last day this week until the fall. He goes down south to enjoy the warmer weather at his other house. And he's painting out the captain's head. The captain's head we've never shown off on tours because it was just used for storage. So we've decided to clean it up and repaint it, and all it's missing is a toilet.
Is that being considered as part of like a secondary tour? Not part of the main tour, but if it's a small enough tour, we let people go in the captain's stateroom, and we'll tell them, if you want to look in the head, go ahead. But our special stem to stern tour, we'll basically take you anywhere. So we'll show you the captain's head. Gotcha. Let's see here. Obviously, that's a Slater.
I forgot to include another photograph. So this is down in the forward engine room, the unrestored engine room. It's kind of like a little workshop area sometimes. It's where all our air compressors are housed. But our aft 3-inch gun mount 33, the training gears to move the gun side to side have sheared off. They're no longer operable really. So they're working to repair or replace the gears to get the gun moving again. So that's what they're doing in this picture.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. What kind of a project is that like? Is that something they want to try and complete this season, or is that?
Well, it's not a major, it has to get done now project because the gun isn't on the tour route. We don't let people interact with it. So,
okay.
But yeah, they opened up the train case and there's just metal shears everywhere, and the gears are stripped. So working to replace that.
And then let's see, you were also talking about painting.
More work week stuff. So these guys are sorting fuses. You can see the fuses in all the containers there. So, and they're testing the fuses. This is all old stuff. So anytime we can get a handful of fuses or radio tubes for our radios, we scoop that stuff up. We have a hoarding situation there. Okay, that picture. This is from our Facebook. So that is one of the fuel tanks under the mess deck. There's about 2 inches of water down there, and there shouldn't be water. It should all be dry. All of our tanks were cleaned out about 10 years ago, and we don't think it's right now. My understanding is we don't think it's water coming from the river necessarily, because it's only 2 inches, so it's not really flooding. So it could be just leaks from water pipes, or mopping, or a leak from above. So we're working to figure that out right now. So that's Doug, and they're opening up the fuel tank, and they're doing a sounding, see how much water's down there. So about 2 inches.
What you need to do is you need to send James Miles down there. He'll figure it out real quick.
And then what's he working on?
That is Angelo. He is our longtime a Singer sewing machine guy. So he's using a 1938 Singer sewing machine there. Does all of our sewing for us. And he's just repairing some canvas covers there. He is one of our many unsung heroes at the ship. There's a lot of canvas that you need to be working on, and he does it all for us.
I imagine.
All right. Let's see. John Up, curator, USS Slater in Albany, New York. Check out their YouTube channel. Search for USS Slater in the search bar, or check out the website, USSSlater.org. Yeah. Thanks, Connor.
Buy a shirt.
All right. And coming up next,
Absolutely.
we've got Connor.
Hello.
And
there we go.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. And you want to...
Well, hey everyone. So as normal, I basically do a summary of what we've been doing at museumships.us, and then I follow up with a ship of the month where I cover a museum ship from a rep within our community and just bring some attention to it. Because while we're doing a lot of interviews with writers, we still need to bring some attention to the wider museum ship community. We are, like I said, I'm from museumships.us. We also have our Facebook group, about 130,000 members. If you have Facebook still, I'd highly recommend you go and visit that group. And there you can go and see all the amazing photos that people are posting of their visits to all these amazing ships, both in the United States, Canada, and around the world. But tonight, I'm just going to have a brief conversation about this vessel. This here is the William A. Irvin. Now, the Irvin is what's called a laker or a ore boat. If those of you who are not familiar with the Great Lakes, a lot of iron ore, grain, stone is transported on the lakes from the upper lakes, Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan and Lake Superior down to the lower lakes, which is Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, and even into the Seaway. And for well over 100 years, from the 1860s and even to today, this style of ship has been on the lakes. This one in particular is the William A. Irvin, which is in Duluth, Minnesota. Highly recommended if you haven't gone. So William A. Irvin was launched in 1937, and she was actually one of 4 ships that were all built at the same time to revitalize shipbuilding industry in the region. Her sisters were the Governor Miller, John Hilst, and the Ralph H. Watson. As for William A. Irvin herself, she was named after one of the executives at United States Steel, which is the company that she is in Duluth, Minnesota. Lego history, Sam. And the ship would operate as the company flagship from 1938 until 1978, a 40-year career. During that time, she would almost exclusively transport iron ore, which would be taken down to places like Cleveland, where they would then be unloaded, and that iron ore would be sent out to Pittsburgh or other refineries. So if you, for example, if you have a warship museum from World War II, there is a chance that some of the early ore that was used in metal to build those ships could have potentially been transported on this ship. Well, granted, there were hundreds of Lakers, so Irvin was just one of many. So, as for the rest of her history, she served pretty steady, no major super incidents, but she was the flagship. She did not go that quick. Her top speed was only about 12 knots, and she just had a consistent back and forth rhythm, back up and down the Great Lakes. These are the passenger cabins. So because she was a flagship, that meant that representatives of United States Steel would come aboard very frequently. And that would mean that she had specialty cabins put aside for these guests. The ship even has a secondary mess hall just for these guests, as well as on occasion their families as well. If you ever get a chance to go to their museum, they actually have some photos of people lounging on the deck up above. Actually, if you look, so like the second deck, like the second level there, that is where a lot of those cabins were up in the forecastle.
It's up on that level, like just below the bridge level.
Yeah, so the bridge wheelhouse level is up on top.
Wheelhouse.
Then you had the captain, and then below you had the guests, and I actually believe the deck below it as well. And then below that, there was another deck where crew were. It's a great tour if you ever get the chance. Now, what ultimately ended up happening to the Irvin, before then, here's a lovely photo of her wheelhouse. By the way, all these photos were taken by me. I have visited this ship on 3 occasions, and I absolutely enjoy going aboard her. What ended up happening to her, though, was basically time moved on. In 1978, I remember correctly. Hold on, let me check my notes. 1978. She would be put into what's referred to as long-term layup, which is where a company will just put their ship away because they don't need it. And the reason why was because the first of the 1,000-foot ore freighters came onto the lakes that year, and one of them belonged to United States Steel. As a result, all their 600-footers, like the William A. Irvin, were basically out of a job because these ships, these new 1,000-footers, could carry up to 3 times more than this ship could. And she was put into layup for 8 years until finally she had a fate that was pretty similar to most museum ships. She was actually purchased by the Duluth Entertainment Convention Center. So in the 80s, she gets purchased and she gets brought to Duluth, where she is now. And she was turned into a museum. And she's operated as a museum since the late 80s. She's one of their big attractions. And one thing I found quite interesting while I was doing the research for this is pretty sure the only ship that has a race named after her. It's in like an actual marathon. There's an event in Duluth called Grandma's Marathon every year, and apparently there's about a 5-mile section which is called the William A. Irvin race. And so that was a fun little fact. Because everyone talks about dry docks. John, you talked about dry docks tonight. Shane, you're preparing to go to dry dock. This ship did get to see dry dock back in 2019. Basically, from what I understand, there was some sort of algae growth at her dock, and they decided to clear that all up. And while she was away, they decided to put her into Fraser Shipyard, which is in Superior, Wisconsin, across the bay. And she got a dry docking. And as you can see there, her hull's looking pretty good for closing in on 90 years now.
How long is it?
She is 610 feet long.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's an impressive ship. Basically, all your engineers live in the back, or at the stern of the ship, and a good chunk of your crew are in the fore, and then you have 5 or 6 cargo holds through the center. One of the cargo holds being a display room, and the other one being a gift. One of the other ones being a gift shop. Okay. It's a really unique museum. I love her. Now, 1937, 1938. For a lot of our World War II era ships, that's pretty old. But believe it or not, William A. Irvin is the youngest Laker preserved as a museum. The other ones being the Martha in Cleveland. She's 1925. The Valley Camp, which is in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. That's 1917. And then you've got the Schoonmaker, which is in Toledo, and that's 1910. So even close to 90 years old, she's actually the youngest of the Lakers that have been preserved as a museum. And if you want to get technical, there's also the SS Meteor, which is even older. That's 1800s. But she's different. She's a whaleback, different classification of ship. Anyway, so yeah, that's my feature for today. If you're in the Duluth region, I'd highly recommend checking her out. Price is pretty reasonable every time I've been there, and it's got one of the better gift shops I've been in.
And like Connor started off by saying, he is actually one of the administrators for the Museum Ships Facebook group.
Yep.
So if you are into the type of stuff that we've been talking about tonight or in past episodes, or the type of content that Connor just mentioned about the Laker, the Irwin, check out the Museum Ships Facebook group. Mm-hmm. And what is it? There's about 10, 20 posts a day on that. Again, if you're planning a road trip, check out our website at museumships.us, where we have an interactive map which allows you to see all the museum ships across the world, basically. Nice.
New ones being added every day. Okay, that's a lie. Every fortnight.
Gotcha. All right, thanks, Connor. One thing I want to mention real quick for my channel, History X. Shane and I, of course, at the end of March, we were down in Baton Rouge, and I did post a video. Shane and I went around with Park Stevenson at the who is the director of the USS Kidd Veterans Museum, and compared and contrasted some of the items in the debris field of the USS Johnston with their present day preserved counterparts on the USS Kidd. And so that video was posted last week. If you find that kind of stuff interesting, check it out on History X. Whoops. On History X. So yeah, like I said, Shane did all the fantastic camera work on that one. Oh, all right.
That was really interesting. Walking around with Parks, who knows so much about the Johnston, and just hearing him talk, and you had the probing questions that really got him to open up and talk about that stuff. That's pretty. It's really interesting.
Oh yeah, you just show him a picture like this,
Ooh, and he just goes,
and he could just take you right to it. And yeah, so that's literally what I did. I showed him different images of the debris field from the USS Johnston, and we went right to it on the Kidd. I would ask him, "How did you know this?" And he would literally key in on the different points that would tell him which gun it was. The chocks and the bits on the side of the deck. I mean, it was just really fascinating. So I strongly recommend you check this one out. I've got another one coming out possibly at the end of the week that's even longer. So if you find that kind of stuff interesting, check out History X. And I'm also going to give the video to the USS Kidd, so they'll be posting it on their YouTube channel as well.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. Can't do this without subscribers and viewers, so we definitely appreciate your time. Definitely appreciate you tuning in. Like I always say, when it comes to supporting these museum ships, check out their YouTube channel, check out the content that they post, hit like, hit subscribe, become a subscriber. It's one of the simplest yet most effective ways to throw your support behind the efforts of people like John and Shane and the ships, the museum ships that they work on. Anything else you guys want to add? All right. Then
thanks everyone to all of our subscribers and viewers tonight. That's great.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, my name's Ken Stano from the YouTube channel History X. Thanks for tuning in tonight.
Good night.
Thank you.